Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR. And I'm your host, the counselor. Today, we're going to talk about you, and I mean you. What do I mean? I mean, sometimes we grow up with these certain views that our family tend to embrace, and it becomes our formed opinions. And we have lots to say about other cultures and ethnicities, and we uh, have this tendency to judge others. And what it is it's really disturbing sometimes because you don't always agree with what a family member might say or what even comes out of your mouth. Like if you're making racist comments, then you might not really feel good, especially when you hear it coming from other people and you know you've said it yourself. So there could be formed opinions inside yourself, things that you need to change. So what we're really talking about today is how to stop. How are you going to stop being a racist? How? How are you going to change within? What are you going to do to make your life better? And can you acknowledge that you are a racist? You're going to have to if you're going to make some change. Even if you spent your whole life believing you love everyone equally, you may have discovered that some of your beliefs about people are actually rooted in racism. It can feel really uncomfortable at first, but learning to recognize these assumptions is an important first step towards overcoming them. It might not happen overnight, but if you stay committed to rejecting these stereotypes, you can become a powerful ally against racism. Recognize that racism isn't binary. It's not that you either are or aren't racist. Racism is a lot more nuanced than that. You can even be friends with people of different races while still being affected by unconscious bias. Chances are good that over time you've been exposed to subtle messages that people of color are somehow less than people who are white. Even if you reject those messages consciously, they still have an impact on how you see race. And you can't overcome racism until you recognize that while you may only think of white people as being affected by bias, people of any background can be racist. For example, a black person might have unconscious biases against people from Latin or Asian communities. Think about it. Understand the connection between race and privilege. It can be hard to realize that having a certain skin color can provide you with some advantages in life, especially if you've been through a lot of struggles. However, racial privilege doesn't necessarily mean you've had it easy. Instead, it means the color of your skin isn't likely to be a factor in why your life might be tough. Learning to recognize this privilege can make you more empathetic to people of color. And with time, you can even leverage your privilege to speak out against racism. Like, if you're white, you may have never thought to question why TV characters, toys, and even bandages reflect your skin color. However, people with darker skin haven't been equally represented in those areas. Once you're aware of this, you may choose to support brands that offer more inclusion options. White privilege also means that a white person may receive a lesser sentence for the same crime as a person of color. Being aware of this might lead you to vote for political candidates who support fair sentencing. Although white privilege is most prevalent privilege, doesn't necessarily apply only to white people. In some cultures, people of color who have lighter skin tones may be considered better than people with darker skin. Begin questioning unconscious biases as you notice them. As you learn more about racism, you're likely to start to recognize thoughts or feelings that are biased or on racial bias. It will feel uncomfortable to challenge yourself at first, but just try to keep an open mind. Even simply identifying when you have these thoughts will help you overcome them. Like if you're commuting to work and catch yourself feeling nervous when you see someone in a head covering, you might stop and tell yourself, this person isn't any more dangerous to me than anyone else on this train. Try to avoid, if you can, stereotyping people you meet. If you want to overcome racism, don't make race related assumptions about a person's interests or abilities. Instead, treat everyone you meet as an individual and get to know them on their own merit. You'll often be surprised at people's complexity when you do this, and you'll be less likely to treat them in a way that would be seen as racism. Like if you catch yourself automatically assuming that a black teenager listens to rap music, you might stop and ask yourself, did I ask them what kind of music they like? Or am I just jumping to the conclusion because of the color of their skin? They might very well like rap, but you might be surprised to discover they also love 90s, death metal, or Broadway show tunes. Don't blame people of color for being oppressed. There are a number of political and social factors that have contributed to racism across the world, like discriminatory practice in the justice system or housing markets. This type of institutional racism often leaves people of color at a disadvantage. They may be less likely to get high paying jobs. They might even find it hard to secure homes in safe neighborhoods and are more likely to be incarcerated. If you haven't experienced these obstacles, it might be easy to say something like, well, people in bad neighborhoods should get better jobs so that they can move out. However, this doesn't take into account the real struggle that people of color face when it comes to things like education, the schools in their neighborhoods. They might not get the same funding as schools in an affluent neighborhood, making it harder to get the skills they need to be in a successful career. I'd like you to acknowledge cultural differences instead of ignoring them. As you're getting to know more people of color, you might notice things about their lives that are different than yours. It's okay to recognize those and even to talk about them. Just be careful not to assume that all people with a certain skin color like or do the same things. You may notice that several of your black friends have huge family reunions. These are a fun annual tradition in many black families. However, when you meet someone new who happens to be black, you shouldn't automatically assume that their family has an annual reunion. Saying things like, I don't see color, makes it hard to celebrate the differences that make us special. Try talking to your friends and coworkers to learn more about things like their favorite cultural foods, their religious practices, or their holiday celebrations. Learning more about your friends' culture can bring you closer to them. However, remember to focus more on what you have in common rather than what's different about you. Be open to growing from your mistakes. Like if someone points out that you said or did something racist, try not to get defensive, but also try not to get too frustrated with yourself. Overcoming racism is a lifelong journey, and we all have growing to do. Just take it as a learning experience and even an opportunity and keep trying to do better. If someone points out that you said something that perpetuates a harmful stereotype about race, apologize, even if you feel embarrassed. Then, on your own time, do a little research to find out what was offensive about what you said, and be sure not to repeat it again. Stop using racial slurs. If you grow up hearing and using racist language, it can be hard to unlearn, but it's an essential step towards becoming anti racist. Slurs with racial connotations are hurtful, and they often perpetuate harmful stereotypes about the people they refer to. In addition to obviously hateful slurs, also examine phrases that have a racial meaning. For example, the word gyp is often used to refer to a bad deal, but it's derived from the word gypsy and is a slur against Romanian people. Similarly, don't display symbols that have racist connotations like Nazi memorabilia or cartoon depictions that exaggerate the features and characteristics of a particular race. Avoid cultural appropriation as well. It can be offensive to borrow someone else's culture for a costume, like wearing a Native American headdress to a music festival, if that's not part of your heritage. I mean, some of the Canadians could remember when Justin Trudeau, our own prime minister, when he was a teenager and he went to a Halloween party, he was wearing blackface. And yes, it came back in his career as of late where they acknowledged and said, hey, what was going on? Well, he apologized for it, but you could imagine how many black families were discouraged, and it just it just puts a mark, a very bad impression upon leadership in this country, because what it says is that blacks are taken for granted, and it just reinforces negative stereotypes. And could you imagine, if that's your leader, what you must be feeling about a leader who's had those opinions and ideals and expressions, especially when they're young, and now they're the leader of a country and they're representing all of us. See, I see when you're a leader of a company or a leader of a country, you are representing the masses. So just keep that in mind. And I suggest avoid constantly mentioning someone's race. Sometimes race and racist actions are a lot more subtle than dropping the N word. These are called microaggressions, and they may include things like teasing someone about their race, referring to someone as articulate or well spoken, because it hints at an assumption that people of their race usually aren't those things. Asking to touch a person's hair or asking where a person is really from, if you notice yourself doing any of these, or if someone points them out, apologize and keep trying to do better. Even if you mean well, constantly calling attention to a person's race can make them feel ostracized, and it may even create a hostile environment. Try to become friends with people from different backgrounds. Shunning racist beliefs and actions is a great start towards overcoming racism. But the best way to become anti racist is to actively engage in conversations and friendships with people from all walks of life. This will help you broaden your perspective, making it easier to understand the challenges faced by many people of color today. Now, be sure to get to know your new friends more deeply than just asking questions about their culture. Remember, it's not their job to be an encyclopedia on race, so don't expect them to spend all their time educating you. Instead, simply treat them as a valued friend. And don't just befriend someone because they're a different race, because that will be obvious and is actually kind of racist in itself. Instead, be open to forming friendships with people of color because you actually like them for who they are. You don't always have to greet everyone you meet with open arms. Some people might give you a bad feeling, and it's important to trust your instinct. However, once you're in a safe environment, take some time to reflect on whether the person's skin color contributed to that feeling. And I want you to be able to support media and art created by people of color. To expand your understanding of race even more, try reading books, watching movies, and listening to speeches by people of color. This can help you get a better perspective on their experiences, even if the subject isn't explicitly about race. If you're not sure where to start, I mean, you could check out the TED Talks, TED approved list of books by black authors. Just go to TED Talk on YouTube, or the website ideas.ted.com slash 62 great books by black authors recommended by TED slash speakers backslash period. Like, if you go and look it up, you will find it. If you want to see black art, you can go online to blackartdepot.com and you will see beautiful artwork. It's just amazing what is up there. Be open to supporting businesses in your community that are owned by people of color as well. Don't overcompensate to seem non-racist. When you're first learning about racism, you might sometimes be struck by the need to prove how open-minded you are to the people around you. You might act overly friendly towards a person of color so that they know you're totally not racist. This kind of thing, while not as hurtful as overt racism, isn't quite the answer either. It can still make people of color feel like you're focusing on their race, and it will be harder to make a genuine connection with them if you're not being completely authentic. Try not to worry too much about how other people see you. It's a lot more important to actually become anti racist than whether you're perceived that way. And When given the opportunity, maybe you can speak out against overt racism. Being silent in the face of obvious bias or discrimination can send the message that you support those actions. You don't necessarily have to seek out and contradict everything racist in the world. But if you're witnessing racism in front of you, speak up to stop it. This might be uncomfortable, especially at first, but allies can be a powerful asset in the fight against racism. Like, for example, if you might say something like, I'm not sure why you feel that way, but I completely disagree. Look for ways to challenge racism in institutions as well. For instance, if you notice discriminatory practices in your school, workplace, or community, call attention to them and fight to have them change. To help encourage larger scale changes, you might join anti racism and anti racist protests and support anti racist legislation. Learning to be anti racist takes a lot of work, and you are going to be making comments that you usually make, and you're going to have to learn how to change and what you do when you do make those comments, because you will have to really do some self-evaluation. Whether intentional or not, you might find yourself having to apologize for something you said that was racist. Before making an apology, plan your words so that you can deliver them effectively. When making an apology, be sure to take responsibility for your words. Acknowledge the hurt you caused, express remorse, and make amends. Recognize the difference between a racist action and a racist person. Doing or saying one racist thing doesn't necessarily make you a bad person, especially if you react well and make up for it. There's a difference between one or two mistakes and a habit of doing bad things. Compared to tripping other people. If you accidentally trip people on occasion and then apologize and make sure they're okay, that doesn't make you a bad person. If you trip people on purpose or refuse to watch where you're going, even though you are repeatedly hurting people, that is a reflection on your character. Your character is not defined by your mistakes, but how you react to your mistakes. If you live in an area where there is racism, you may unintentionally pick up a few racist attitudes. It happens. To help fix it, you can work actively on unlearning and challenging your questionable thoughts and those assumptions. Recognize that it may have taken a lot of courage for that person to come to you. Remember that. Living in a racist world can be very tough for some people. If they've had a lot of bad experiences, it can be stressful, and they may have a really hard time figuring out how to bring it up with you and how to phrase it well because they don't want to be attacked. Compared to being punched, imagine if people often punched you in the stomach, sometimes lightly and sometimes really hard. You would get a bruise there and it would really hurt. Thus, anytime you get punched in that bruise, it might hurt a lot more. People who didn't understand your bruise might think you were overreacting because they didn't know you were actually hurt. Similarly, people of color might react strongly to racism if they have already been hurt many times. This context may help you understand the stress that the other person is experiencing. Keep it in mind to help you empathize with them. And you got to take accusations seriously. Even if you don't understand why, act with the assumption that the person has a very good reason for saying that they're offended. Racism isn't something that people take lightly. It's better to be too serious than to blow off someone else's pain. If someone points out a racist comment, they aren't saying you're a terrible person or even you're a racist. They're telling you that you said something hurtful. Don't take it personally, but instead recognize that they're helping you see blind spots. You might wonder, what was racist in your words? If so, ask the person. You might have a lot of questions, so ask them one at a time. For example, if you're unclear, ask, what did I say that was racist? You might also wonder, how was that offensive, or what could I have said instead? Don't push them to explain if they're uncomfortable. While some people are willing to gently guide you through the painful world of racism, it isn't their job, as I mentioned earlier. So don't expect it and express gratitude if they take time for you. If the interaction happens online, consider private messaging the person to talk about it further and ask your questions in that format. And take responsibility for your actions. Own up to what you said and accept any consequences that may occur. Taking responsibility means admitting that you said something hurtful and that there's no excuse for it. It means you don't blame anything or anyone else for what came out of your mouth. Taking responsibility often doesn't feel good, but it's an important part of admitting your actions and showing that you're sincere and taking steps to amend what you did wrong. Now, how do you apologize? Because you got to do that. You have to learn. So I suggest you plan your apology. Choose the circumstances around your apology carefully. For example, don't casually bring it up in the middle of something or around strangers. Try to apologize in a private way. Choose a good time and a quiet setting that will facilitate the discussion and apology. Pick a time you know the person or people are available and have time to talk. Allow some time for discussion. Say, is this a good time to talk? Or can we talk tomorrow after class? If they seem iffy, it may help to tell them that you want to talk to them to apologize. You don't want to feel rushed in your apology, nor do you want the other person or people to feel awkward or uncomfortable. Now, you're going to have to decide how to deliver your apology. In most cases, you'll speak in person to one person or a group of people. There are certain instances that may warrant a public apology. If you made a racist comment online, for example, you may want to publicly take responsibility and apologize for your comment. Or if you made a comment in your workplace or classroom, you may want to revisit that space and those people and make amends. You may choose to write a letter if you struggle to say things out loud and have difficulty wording your apology. Try a letter or an email. This can help you say what you need to say and how you want to say it. Be sincere in your delivery. What you say should be heartfelt. If you are giggling and not trying to act serious, no one will take you seriously. Make it clear that you are serious about your apology and about racism. Believe that you mean what you say and really mean it. Like, you should know why you're apologizing and why what you said was hurtful before you apologize. You should know this. Choose your words thoughtfully. You want to dig yourself out of a hole, not dig yourself further in it. Avoid trying to justify why you made your comment or making a non-apology. The apology isn't about how they feel or if they feel bad. It's about your actions. Avoid saying things like, I'm sorry if you feel bad, or I'm sorry you didn't understand me. That doesn't work. One helpful technique is to use the word and instead of the word but, such as, I'm sorry and I didn't mean it, instead of, I'm sorry but I didn't mean it. Don't apologize yet if you're still upset or being called out. You don't want to give a sarcastic or lazy apology like, I'm sorry if you got upset because you're so sensitive. This will only make things worse. It's better to wait and speak more thoughtfully than to apologize poorly. Acknowledge the hurt or foul. Start your apology by admitting responsibility, then acknowledge the hurt your comment caused, showing an understanding of how your words were hurtful and that you understand the pain that it caused. Like, say, I thought my comment was funny, but now I see how insensitive it was towards black people, and I'm horrified I said that. Or, I was so thoughtless to say that, and I realized that I seriously hurt you. Show remorse. It's important to show that you feel bad about what you said. Even if you're hurt the person unintentionally, you still can feel remorse for the effects of your racist comment. Remorse can express guilt, shame, embarrassment, humility. I'm sorry. I heard people using that word, but I didn't know exactly what it meant. I'm horrified that it had such negative connotations, and I would never have used it had I known. I'm truly sorry. Be specific. Speak specifically about what you did that was wrong. It's best not to speak in generalities such as, I'm sorry I said something racist. Instead, say specifically what you did that was wrong and why it was offensive. For example, you could say, my comment about Latinos sounded funny to me, but now I see that it was out of line and offensive. Say, I'm sorry. It's important that your apology contains the words, I'm sorry. Make it clear to the person that you're making an apology and not trying to make excuses or justify your words. Saying the words, I'm sorry, makes it clear that you're making an apology. Try to say, I'm sorry early on in the apology. Don't wait until the end of your apology to say the words, or else it can be confusing. Make sure your apology is genuine and assure them it won't happen again. Avoid placing further emotional burdens on the person you apologize to. You may be feeling guilty and rotten inside, however, it is your responsibility to deal with those feelings, and the other person shouldn't have to handhold you through them. Focus on their feelings, not your own. You should be comforting them, not the other way around. You can mention your bad feelings without expecting the other person to fix them for you. I feel terrible for hurting you, and I'm so sorry. Is a decent apology. I feel terrible. I can't sleep just thinking about it, and I've never felt this bad in my life, and you forgive me, right? That's not appropriate. If you're struggling to process your feelings, talk to someone who isn't involved in the incident. For example, if you upset your friend from work, maybe you could talk to your mom about it. Consider their feelings, like listen closely to their response and really consider what they say. Pay attention to their words and feelings and show that you're listening by nodding occasionally and encouraging them to continue by saying, I see, Respond to those words by validating their feelings and empathizing with them. See things from their point of view and understand why they feel the way they do. Say, I can understand why you feel hurt, or I don't realize how much my comment affected you. Assure them that it doesn't happen again. Let the other person know that it won't happen again. This helps in rebuilding trust and repairing a relationship. It also shows that you've learned from the experience and don't want others to be hurt by your comments. Just be sure to honor this commitment. Like, this was a painful experience, and I'll be sure to be more careful with my words in the future. I will not, absolutely not make these comments again. Make amends. Take your apology one step further by making amends. Like, is there anything I could do to make this up to you? Think about anything you can do to improve or do better and share this with the person. However, don't make empty promises and grandiose gestures as a way to relieve your guilt. You could say, I know this is a blind spot, so I'm signing up for an online class about racial diversity. Take action. Perhaps this experience has opened your eyes to larger issues about race, and you want to get involved in spreading awareness and equality. Join a diversity group at your school or university or your workplace to encourage working together. Get involved politically by raising awareness in your community or signing petitions that promote equality for people of all backgrounds. Do what you can to promote awareness and sensitivity. Perhaps you might even stop someone and start a discussion about race after they make an offensive comment. See, it's going to take work, as I mentioned earlier, and you're going to have to realize that you're going to encounter people who just react to some of your comments, and some will react aggressively. However, you need to stay calm. You need to understand that if you're trying to make yourself a better person and do better in the world, that you are going to need to get control of yourself. You're going to need to be calm and control and be genuine. Do not try to change because you feel that you're being perceived negatively by others. Think about that. There's a lot of people out there that have been accused of racism, so they start to, go into acquiring resources. However, they're not genuine in their efforts, and it just comes out and makes the situation worse. And if you find that you're looking for a quick fix, it's not really going to work. What you have to understand is that you are going to feel a lot of pressure, but you can handle it. because you're looking to do good things, and the world's only going to be a better place when you open up your eyes. And believe it or not, you might have to get away from some of those influences. If you have family members who have strong opinions on different races and they seem to express it, and you find it yourself, that you are sitting there in silence and you're just listening to them ramble on, or their opinions, oh, I can't change their opinions. You might be surprised what you can change. And at least you can live where, if you do address them, if you tell a family member, listen, I think that that's kind of discriminatory, and I'm really not about that. And I would appreciate if you don't make those comments. They might be offended, but that's okay. It might stop them from being so overt, right? They might reduce the amount of ignorance. They might not change altogether. That's not our purpose. If we could get that, that's beautiful. However, we do need to keep in mind that we have to be comfortable and learn to be uncomfortable sometimes in certain situations to promote change. So I want to say thank you to my listeners. Be like the wise old bird and spread the word. Thank you, people, and take care of yourself.